Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily News. I'm Nicholas Richardson. Russian GRU military intelligence agent Pavel Rubtsov, caught by Polish security services and held in custody, reviewed his files and was able to find out how he had been tracked down by Polish counterintelligence. The spy Rubtsov was exchanged and went to Russia, and with him, the knowledge of the operation of the Polish security services. The scandal was reported by the daily newspaper Rzeczpospolita. The case was investigated by Radosław Jankiewicz.
The man accused of spying for Russia, Pavel Rubtsov, who claimed to be Spanish journalist Pablo González, was allowed to see his case file just before leaving custody with the permission of Bodnar's prosecutor's office. As a spokesman for the National Prosecutor's Office told Rzeczpospolita, the suspect became acquainted with classified materials in the secret office of the Internal Security Agency, with the unclassified at the headquarters of the prosecutor's office. According to Dziennik, Rubtsov became acquainted with the investigation files in his case during the first 2 weeks of July. Incidentally, he was also able to learn how the mechanisms of the Internal Security Agency work, where he reviewed the secret files. It seems that Rubtsov's most effective intelligence work for Putin was done at the headquarters of the Internal Security Agency. On the secret protocols are the names of Internal Security Agency functionaries, testimonies, operational control materials and confessions, and many other tidbits. And spies have good memories. The prosecutor's office in charge of the Spies case says it gave the file to the Russian agent as a matter of procedure, even though it could have denied it to protect state interests. The situation is so bizarre that I think even then there was no doubt that this gentleman was a Russian agent, because it was known that he was going to participate in an exchange with Russia organized by US services. Interestingly, 250,000 zlotys were spent just on translating the files provided to the Russian agent into Polish, Russian, and Spanish. We asked the parliamentarians of the Tusk coalition why the Russian agent was given access to the entire file of the espionage case. It seems the questions were quite uncomfortable. I watched your program recently, and this is some kind of... But I'm not asking about what you watched, I'm asking about Pavel Rubtsov. I wanted to ask you about Pavel Rubtsov's access to files, to the open files, but also to the secret files that he had access to in the secret office of the Internal Security Agency. The former head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Administration of the Civic Platform wants to investigate Rubtsov's case only after he arrives in Moscow. There is a need for a white paper on this case, on Rubtsov's activities here in general during the years he worked as a Russian intelligence agent, on his contacts with journalists, with politicians, with state institutions, but also, at the end of the day, on how he was able to get these prosecution files, who gave him the permission to do so. This is something that does not need to be explained, because the file was made available to the Russian spy by the Bodnar prosecutor's office. A colonel of the Russian military intelligence service GRU, Rubtsov, who operated under the cover of the Spanish journalist Pablo González, was arrested by the service at the end of February 2022, when its coordinator was Mariusz Kamiński. He had been in custody ever since. Bodnar's people, I want to emphasize once again, are giving information about the activities of the special services to a Russian agent, and this is not the first time. Under previous governments, they handed over the data of Belarusian dissident Aleś Białacki. Not long after Rubtsov became acquainted with the files of his case, on July 31st, he was released from custody, and on August 1st, he was greeted at the Moscow airport by the bloody Putin himself. This is an absolutely scandalous situation that exposes Poland to additional dangers. Poland, I remind you, is in the center of the information war waged by Russia, and we are facilitating such an operation with such decisions. On the occasion of the case, the, quote, excellent coordination on the line of the services managed by Donald Tusk and the prosecutor's office, led by Adam Bodnar, came to light. When planning and issuing the consent, the prosecutor did not know about the revocation of temporary detention, which took place on July 31st. Why was this man, who may have been a very important part, or perhaps a linchpin of a much wider and very high-reaching scheme, let out of Poland at all? With what knowledge can Rubtsov now enrich Russia? This is certainly a serious enrichment, and it is a scandalous thing. A thing for resignation. In many countries, it would be the resignation of the government. The issue of access to Rubtsov's secret information seems similar to what happened during the first Tusk government, when, during the reset of relations with Russia, the then military counterintelligence service drove another Russian agent around Polish military bases. In 2013, the military counterintelligence service signed an agreement written in Moscow with the FSB. They simply believe that this agreement is in effect, that, since they signed a document that they are to warn Russia of intelligence threats coming from the outside, well, they warn. If they catch a Russian spy, a GRU officer, and they have information that could be useful to him, they give it to him, because they signed the agreement, negotiated, while drinking vodka and handing sabers to KGB men. And what does Donald Tusk say about all this? The government passed a bill on Tuesday that will allow the head of the Internal Security Agency, rather than the courts, to decide which online content is terrorist content. It will be removed upon the decision of the head of the Internal Security Agency. Radosław Jankiewicz, Republika.
The left-wing coalition wants to ease access to abortion, that is, to ease the murder of unborn babies. Parliament has rejected a bill on the subject, so the government wants to order doctors to perform abortions by decree. The Prime Minister has ordered the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Justice to work together on the text. A certificate from a psychiatrist that pregnancy and childbirth harms a woman is to be sufficient to murder the child. Why has the government created a gateway to circumvent the existing law? Edyta Holdinska examines this.
A new regulation is set to change the practice of abortion in hospitals. Is this the government's response to the lack of agreement within the coalition on the introduction of an abortion law? Is this how the Ministry of Health wants to circumvent the law? And what will the practice in question look like? Today, I'm checking. These guidelines do not change the law in any way. We as the Ministry of Health give interpretations on how these laws should be read. If the Catholic clerics or other critics of these guidelines wanted to tighten the anti-abortion law, they had 8 years in which to do so. They did so in the aspect of lethal defects, but did not move the aspect of the life or health of the woman. Since we can't open the gate because of the lack of a majority in Parliament, we open the wickets. The government itself admits that since the abortion law cannot be passed, it will circumvent the law, and it presents doctors with its interpretation of the law. It publishes guidelines and a regulation. The interpretation itself is flawed and incomplete. The provisions on family planning, on the conditions for the termination of pregnancy, have been selected, and the provisions of the Code of Medical Ethics have been omitted, thus creating a document without legal force, while at the same time imposing expectations on doctors. How is this expectation sanctioned? In a regulation on the basis of which hospitals and doctors who do not implement it will simply be penalised. Well, this is a rather clever way of circumventing the fact that the premise of life and health functions in such a way and is compatible. It has been unusually misinterpreted, as the Minister said, that the reality has changed, and these guidelines, which are additional things, specify that de facto abortion on the basis of this certificate will be possible. The guidelines on abortion, drawn up jointly by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Justice, have resonated. The regulation, even though there is no law, may in practice allow the killing of unborn children in additional, non-legally sanctioned cases. A psychiatrist with a license to practice's recognition that this woman's pregnancy is a threat to her mental health is a sufficient indication under the current law to terminate the pregnancy. Absurdities abound, but the Minister of Justice offers reassurance. They are the result of an analysis of 590 proceedings in these cases. The aim of these guidelines is to make prosecutors and public prosecutors' offices more sensitive to this type of a case, and to show that we should pay particular attention to the situation of a woman who is at this difficult moment in her life. Only the legal situation in Poland has not changed. The rationale concerning the threat to life and health, this rationale has always functioned, and because of it abortion is allowed in Poland as for a criminal act. Simply, A doctor can state a threat to health, write a certificate, and on the basis of this certificate, every hospital is obliged to perform an abortion under the threat of 2% of the contract with the National Health Fund. The Pabianica Medical Centre, which refused to perform the abortion, has already been fined by the Ministry of Health the hefty sum of 550,000 zloty. The hospital appealed the decision and the fine was reduced to 250,000 zloty. The National Health Fund is conducting more such proceedings. The ruling coalition failed to agree on the abortion issue, but the Ministry of Health, together with the Ministry of Justice, orders doctors to circumvent the law and introduce abortion through the back door.
More worrying news about the fate of PKP Cargo, one of Europe's largest rail freight companies. The company was profitable last year, but the central left-wing government wants to downsize it, split it up and, allegedly, sell it to foreign investors. The main candidate is the German state-owned Deutsche Bahn Cargo. Poland's PKP Cargo is announcing mass redundancies of 4,000 workers, while at the same time, DB Cargo is hiring in Poland. What a coincidence. Janusz Życzkowski investigates.
Assistant to the Chief Executive Officer, reporting specialist, welding engineer, situator, electrician and machinist, Deutsche Bahn Cargo Poland is currently recruiting for such positions, among others. The announcements are available online and information can be obtained by telephone. Deutsche Bahn Cargo Poland, hello. Good morning. I'd like to know if your company is currently recruiting for the position of machinist. Please wait a moment. So to contact you, I should send you my resume by email. Yes, exactly. Recruitment at the Polish branch of the German carrier coincides with massive problems at the Polish company PKP Cargo. On Tuesday, its employees took to the tracks to protest restructuring plans and government inaction. This is a tragic blow, especially for those workers who are on the list for dismissal, because they all have children, families. They have taken out mortgages, bought apartments, and now they will face a spectre of possible homelessness, because you know what can happen if they don't keep up with their payments. The management of PKP Cargo and the government, however, are not particularly concerned about the rail workers' protests. Instead, they respond to the protests with a political attack, blaming their predecessors for the company's problems. The filing of a complaint against me with the Public Prosecutor's Office is so absurd given the fact that the post of Minister of State Assets is currently held by Minister Jakub Jaworowski, that it is difficult to comment on it in any serious way. I have the impression that today there is an expectation coming from the very top, i.e. from Tusk, that every functionary of this regime, whether it is the chairman of a state-owned company or some minister, or the president of an office, or anyone else who feels that he is part of the clique, should file some kind of complaint with the prosecutor's office against someone connected with the law and justice government, preferably some important minister. The hiring of Deutsche Bahn and the layoffs at PKP Cargo are no coincidence, because in business, as in nature, there is always a balance. The problem is that the Polish authorities are letting the process get out of hand, and Poland may lose influence over a pillar of state sovereignty. Janusz Życzkowski, TV Republica.
Emotional crowds filled Indonesia's national stadium on Thursday as Pope Francis's final day in Jakarta was marked by heartfelt moments. Pope Francis drew more than 80,000 fans to a Catholic Mass in the world's largest Muslim-majority nation.
Saint Teresa of Calcutta, whose memory we celebrate today and who tirelessly cared for the poorest of the poor and became a promoter of peace and dialogue, used to say, "When we have nothing to give, let us give that nothing. And remember, even if you reap nothing, never tire of sowing. Brothers and sisters, never tire of sowing, for that is life." Singing and smiling, members of the crowd cheered for the Pope in the stadium, and few got the chance to kiss his hand as he greeted them at an event behind closed doors. Brothers and sisters, I would also like to say to you, to this nation, to this wonderful and varied archipelago, do not grow weary of setting sail and casting your nets. Do not grow weary of dreaming. Do not grow weary of dreaming and building again a civilization of peace. Always dare to dream of fraternity, which is a true treasure among you. Guided by the word of the Lord, I encourage you to sow seeds of love, confidently tread the path of dialogue, continue to show your goodness and kindness with your characteristic smile. I have been told that you are a smiling people. Please don't lose your smile and keep going. Earlier in the day, the Pope met young people with disabilities during a meeting with beneficiaries from charitable organisations. Jakarta was the first stop on a 12-day trip to Southeast Asia and Oceania, with visits to East Timor, Singapore and Papua New Guinea.
That's the news. Thank you for watching, and from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.